So now to turn to our first panel, which is focused on philanthropic investing and grant making. And first, I'm just excited to be joined by Gayatri Agnew from the Walmart Foundation, who's been a great friend for several years. Hi, Gayatri.
Hi, Maria.
And I am super excited because this morning we released an announcement that the Walmart Foundation is making a $6 million investment in JFF. And this is an investment that is going to enable us to really continue to scale our work and build our capacity as an organization. I just want to, so thankful to you, and also just want to mention that some early investment from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation really teed us up to make this possible, to kind of get us ready for this investment. And we also have received an unsolicited donation from IBM, as well as another anonymous donor. So we're really excited as an organization. Just wanted to take a moment to thank you for your support and ongoing encouragement.
It's our pleasure, Maria. And with the world's eyes here on JFF and the final day of your digital experience conference, on behalf of the Walmart Foundation, we just want to thank you for your leadership. None of this is possible without leadership and change management, and you are steering this ship in the right direction and have an incredible team along for the ride with you. And so on behalf of the team at Walmart, we just want to say thank you to JFF for believing that we can together create an equitable future for all. And we really do believe in the direction that you are taking this organization. So thank you for your leadership.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Gayatri. And next, I'm going to ask Hillary Pennington to join us. Hillary is the Executive Vice President at the Ford Foundation. Hi, Hillary. But more important for JFF, she is the co-founder of JFF. So Hillary and Arthur White had the vision to launch JFF back in 1983. And it is really that vision and the hard work that you did that built the foundation for where we are today. So I want to thank you just with your JFF hat on and welcome you with your Ford Foundation hat on. Thanks for being with us.
It's really my great pleasure to be with you. I am so proud of JFF's work and team and leadership, Maria. So thank you.
Great. And I'm sure many of us probably read a big announcement came out from the Ford Foundation this morning. So maybe share the headlines with us.
Well, yes, on the theme of investment, we have gone to the markets for, I think, what will be the first time a philanthropy has gone to the markets to raise a social impact bond of $1 billion that will allow us basically to double our payout over the next 2 years, really to put resources behind critical organizations working on racial justice and economic justice to try to make sure that they have what they need to be on the front line at this really critically important time. So we're very excited about that, and thank you for asking.
Awesome, great. And so now we're going to call up Danette Howard, who is Senior Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer at the Lumina Foundation, and Charles Field, who is the Vice President of Program Implementation at the James Irvine Foundation. Both the Lumina Foundation and the Irvine Foundation have been great partners to JFF over many years as well. And I will leave you all to it. Looking forward to hearing the conversation.
Well, thank you, Maria, and welcome, colleagues. I want to start with just a word about the moment that we are in and how this panel came into being. I think all of us know that this is a time when the streets in America are convulsing with people demanding that we do better as a country around issues of racial justice and racial equity. And I want to give a huge shout out to Jamie Marasotis, who was originally on this panel, for calling the fact that it was a panel of all white people. And together with JFF, all of us, the original panel, felt that that was not acceptable. And so Walmart and Irvine and Lumina turned to senior leaders of color in their organizations to ask them to step onto the panel. And by doing that, I want to just say we did the same thing that way too often happens, which is that we've asked people of color to step forward and do the work the rest of us should be doing. So in preparing for this panel with these panelists, we talked about that. We talked about that together. And we thought that that would actually be an honest and authentic way to start the conversation today, because the thing that they each want to talk about is how you reconcile philanthropy and equity in a moment like this. How do you manage yourself inside your own system, your own foundation, because we all sit within systems? And then how is your institution working in the broader society to try to advance equity? And how do you balance the tensions between philanthropy's privilege and the fight for equity? So that's the conversation we want to have. I'm going to let each person just start with a couple of words, and then we hope that we'll have a real dialogue with each other. But Jeanette, can we start with you?
Yes, good morning. And Hillary, thank you for opening the panel in the way that you did. I think that one of the ways that philanthropy can begin to effectuate the kind of change that we all hope to see is by being more transparent and authentic in the way that we approach the issues that we hope to solve and reconcile, and also in the ways that we engage with our partners. So I appreciate your transparency and modeling that for us today. Now, I think that one of the ways that philanthropy can make a big difference, especially in the moment that we find ourselves as communities of color have been disproportionately and adversely impacted by the pandemic. And also, as we find ourselves dealing and grappling with and coming face to face with the racial ills that have plagued our country since its existence, I think that philanthropy can play a big role, and perhaps even a more significant role than it has played in the past, by naming this, saying we have an opportunity to call the question at this point in time and to put our resources behind these important issues in ways that we've done in the past, but we can double down right now. You know, when you have the opportunity to work in philanthropy, as we all do, we get to sit in seats of great privilege. We also have significant power in terms of deciding how the resources of our organizations get used as we try to be responsible and good fiduciaries. And we also have the opportunity to direct those resources to communities and to organizations that have far too long perhaps been marginalized, that haven't gotten a fair piece of the pie, so to speak. So at Lumina Foundation, while we have been committed to racial equity for quite some time, as I know all of you on this panel with me have, we've started to think not only about supporting equity and advancing equity, which for us means making sure that everyone, every organization gets what they deserve, even if that is not doled out in equal measure. But we have to go a step further, and we have to couple equity with justice. And justice means getting at the root and the core of the problem by doing our part to dismantle the systems that have allowed the inequities to persist. And so that's where our efforts are right now, Hillary, coupling equity with justice, trying to do that courageously, and also attempting to do that in community with the partners that we seek to serve. And the final word that I will say on that is we've asked for our partners to hold us accountable, because in philanthropy, we don't have shareholders, we don't have alumni, as universities do, who will go out in the streets marching if we aren't holding true to the commitments that we make. And so we're thinking about ways to authentically, again, and with great sincerity, invite our partners as colleagues to the table to hold us accountable to the commitments that we make.
Well, Jeanette, that is so powerful. And I hope we have time to come back and talk more about what you're doing, because we all need to learn from that. So thank you. And I want to move now to you, Charles, and really just ask you the same question and get your reflections on this issue of equity and philanthropy. And, you know, building on what Jeanette said, we know from a research study Bridgeband just issued that people of color-led organizations are systematically under-resourced compared to others. They get, and I know Irvine has been thinking a lot about that. So over to you, Charles.
Well, good morning where I'm from, but from California. And I want to thank JFF for their leadership and a great conference over the last few days and Hillary's opening remarks. I wanted to start with a question that we engaged at the panel about what it means to be an individual actor in philanthropy and the nonprofit sector. Probably like many of us, I moved into the nonprofit sector and into philanthropy because there was a real deep values alignment. My personal values had a real alignment with the places where I worked. And that is really a deep privilege. A lot of us don't get to work at places that very articulately are working towards justice, that have a set of aligned values. One of the things I've also learned throughout philanthropy is that the organization and you are not the same, right? And so all the foundations I've worked at, including Irvine, do excellent work and have a really, really great set of values. But they aren't always Charles' values. They don't always overlay 100% to my values. And so I did have to understand that there is a difference between the organization and me. And how do I live out my values? How do I really work towards the mission inside the organization when at times there may be some level of contradiction or conflict with my own? And I think that is a tension that is felt, especially in significant moments of strife, right? And so philanthropy, as progressive and as left-leaning as a number of our institutions are, aren't always going as far as what we see in the streets. And so we have to figure out what is the role I think our institutions can play in fighting for justice, but not confuse that with what we think always individually, what is our individual actions. So I think those things are can be a constant tension, but I actually think they're a good tension because I think they promote the right conversations inside the organization around what is our mission, what are our values, how to align, and how do we evolve over time. And I think those are the conversations that we are having at Irvine. As someone who focuses on economic justice and economic mobility, and what does it mean to be articulate about institutional racism through that framework? And so I think the organization is different than the individual, but ultimately the organization is made of individuals who are trying to figure out how we both live into our values into this space. The last thing I'd say, because I wanna get to just what we think about at Irvine a lot is the economy that we work in. And I think we are often forget that the economy is made by us. Like the rules that actually define the economy are made by people and they should serve people. And so when they are not serving us, and I would argue it is not just since COVID that the economy has not served a significant part of the population, it is pre-COVID that the economy has not served a significant part of the population, then we need to find ways to change the rules of the economy so they serve more people. Manufacturing jobs were not always good jobs. And then we decided to make those good jobs as a country. And so we need to think about how do we do that now for the jobs that we are calling essential jobs. I think that is the work that philanthropy can do. We can research, we can support advocacy, we can center the voices for Irvine of low-wage workers so their interests and demands are understood at the highest levels. I think that's the role of philanthropy right now.
Thank you, Charles. That was this is very frustrating, this panel, because I'm sure everyone listening would love to hear the conversation that you guys are opening up, and hopefully throughout Horizons, there will be ways to do that. But that you are right, we make the economy. The economy is made by human decisions. It's not that we don't know how to be more fair, it's that we choose not to. So Gayatri, we are going to close out with you and just your reflections on these very big topics, and I apologize for the very short time.
No, it's fine, Hillary. Actually, some late breaking news from our green room. We get 5 extra minutes, which digital screen time is very exciting. So I will, and then if we can squeeze any comments in after that, let's do it. So look, Danette, I love what you said, which is so straightforward. It's just we have to name it. And Charles, what you said, which is that we operate in a system, but a system is made up of individual human people, right? We are individual actors inside of these systems. And in a lot of ways, we shape these systems. And so for me, I came to work at Walmart 5.5 years ago to help to lead the social impact efforts addressing economic mobility issues at a company whose history and reputation is maybe not always positively associated with economic mobility in America. And my choice to move from California to Arkansas was about finding a place that worked for me to work for justice. And that's a really personal, individual choice. And I have not for a day regretted that choice. But one of the things that I think is very challenging is I have a lot of friends, I guess maybe some former friends, that really begrudged my personal choice to try to work on changing a system. And by a system, I mean in part just corporate America and the role that corporations can play in creating just communities, because I believe that they can. And I had a lot of friends who didn't see that theory of action the same way that I did, and therefore made a choice not to respect me for the fact that I saw it that way. And so I think for me, one of the things that the last 2 weeks, especially the elevation of focus on structural racism in America really bubbles up is how we are open and honest and clear and truthful with one another. And that cuts all ways. There's not one right way to work for justice. And so I really think that this idea that each of us have a role to play, that's where we have to start. That I need to be asking myself every day, when did I choose to speak up and when did I choose to be silent? And I think especially for philanthropists of color, who, as Danette rightly said, like sit in a position of power and privilege, but come in many cases, certainly in mine, come out of a place that is very uncomfortable with power and privilege, right? You constantly just sit in and wrestle in that tension. And just to make it very real for folks, like this actually wasn't at Walmart, I was at a different foundation before I came here. One of my early experiences of being in a ballroom and seeing that spread of food, and the event ended, everybody left, and the food was still on the table. And Gayatri Agnew was like, I'm putting those rolls in my purse. Because that's like, it's just how I was raised. Like you don't leave food on the table. And so I think to me, like I always think about that moment for me, and what that means and how I grant make. Like you don't leave food on the table. So who's getting the resources and who has a surplus of resources, and how do we work to collectively reconcile what that process looks like? And so I think my challenge for those watching today, especially those of you that are in roles of decision-making in philanthropy, is who are you emailing back? Who are you calling? Whose calls are you taking? And are you picking up the phone because your senior leader told you that that person was important? Or are you picking up the phone because you know that it is your job to get more proximate to the communities that you serve? And that's our everyday. So every single one of us can do more, but we can't change anything unless we do it together. And Hillary, your dog is adorable. So thank you.
Sorry about that. That's Oscar, everybody. Hopefully I'll be here for 3 more minutes. So thank you, Gayatri. That was really honest and powerful. And it is the thing we all sit with all the time. And we are a very, very judgmental sector. So I want to let Charles and Danette have the last word, because even with our extra minutes, we're at time. So Charles, to you, and then to you, Danette, you can close us out.
Yeah, last word. I mean, so a real privilege to be on the panel and be in community with this group. I think, when I started philanthropy, I remember thinking, how hard is it to give, like, how hard can it be to give money away? Like, what is that? Is that a real job? And like, I got inside philanthropy and I realized that it actually isn't really hard to do it. I think we make it hard. And so we are now in a moment where philanthropy needs to step up, where like all the rules and regs and caveats that we put around everything, we need to push those away. For those of us who entered philanthropy from the nonprofit sector, from the corporate sector, because they thought this was a reason to do good, a place to do good, and you got up the chain and you're like, okay, now I can do it, now I have some power. Now is the time to use your power. Now is the time to do the right thing. Use your privilege right now.
Yes,
Wow.
and I couldn't agree more. The only thing I will add is my thanks to both Charles and Gayatri for having the opportunity to be a part of this conversation with you, Hillary, for your great words of insight. And I think that we need to find a way to continue this conversation. This has just kind of scratched the surface. There are so many layers underneath that we have to fully examine in order to become the types of individuals, funders, and organizations that I think we all want to be. So I hope we'll find ways to keep this going.
I want to just thank the three of you for really a deep and real conversation, and amen. That is exactly the work we are called to do. And let's continue and let's get at it. Thank you so much for a fabulous panel. And I think, Maria, I turn it back to you.